Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you. Welcome to INE Live. Today is Monday, November 22nd, the week, of course, of Thanksgiving. And normally we would call this show Tech Tuesday, but because of the holiday, we're streaming today instead. So welcome on in. I'm your host, Kathryn Brown. Today we are chatting with Michael Hilton. Some of you may have heard of Michael. He is a very familiar face around INE, and we've been following his journey to become one of the youngest CCIEs in the world for a couple of years now. He is a fantastic person, an inspirational story. You're going to get a lot out of it, I promise. First, we'll bring Michael in just a moment, but first, as we do each time we stream here on INE Live, I want to let you know we are streaming live across social media platforms right now, including LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Be sure to like and subscribe on the social media platform you're using so you can stay in the loop when we do get live. And we want you to get involved. Talk to us, talk to others. We love to see that. I already see chat active this morning. Love to see that. Our team is monitoring chat. If you have a comment for Michael, go ahead and drop it in. If you have a question, put a Q at the beginning so we can find those questions easily, and we will get to as many as we can today. With that, I want to bring in Michael Hilton. Michael, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey everyone, hey Annie. Thank you very much for bringing me on. I'm super excited to be on the show.
Yeah, we are. I was telling you a moment ago during our tech check. I'm really excited to get an update and just kind of hear where you are right now. Michael, I first met you about a year ago, I guess, right after you got connected with INE. Just to start, can you just kind of talk a little about how that connection unfolded and where you were at that point in your life?
Sure. So probably a few years back, I decided I wanted to go for my CCIE journey. I had finished my CCNP, and I had always, ever since I started my Cisco journey, I thought, hey, you know what? I want to become a CCIE. So I was looking for resources. I was looking for possible help because there was a lot of expense towards getting study material and even taking the exam. So I reached out to different people. I even set up a GoFundMe, and that went well. And it just so happened that Mr. Richard McLean, which is the CEO of INE, he actually reached out to me. He saw my profile on LinkedIn. He was connected with me for a few months, and he said, "Hey, I love your journey. We'd really love to come on and sponsor you." And this was back around 2019 or so, late 2019. And we're still here a few years later. We're still talking, and it's been amazing.
So you're 18 now. So you were what, 16 at that point?
Yes, I was actually I was 15, almost about to be 16.
Okay. I'm trying to put myself in your shoes. You know, a 15-year-old, almost 16-year-old kid, basically, who kind of stumbles into this very unique and really cool relationship with a CEO. How did that happen? And I guess what was your reaction when you guys started connecting?
So my first reaction was I almost thought it was probably someone trying to send me like a spam email or something. I wasn't sure immediately because I had been using INE material for a while, from ever since my CCNT, CCNA, and even my CCNP. So it was almost, I would say, very shocking to see that the CEO of the training company that I love the most reached out to me and wanted to support my journey. So I was really in shock. I did a bit of research on my end to make sure everything was legit, but I was over ecstatic and very excited about it.
So tell us a little bit. You had the GoFundMe, right? You had
Hmm.
GoFundMe, and you were basically raising money for this exam and the training materials for the exam, right?
Yep, that is correct. So my first kind of goals were just to get some books and some training material from various vendors to help me prepare for the exam.
So, well, how expensive is it? I guess for someone who may be thinking about getting into this, from a start to
So
finish kind of training, exam, all in, what does it run someone?
it runs anyone from a few thousand to, I've seen some people say, depending on what materials they use, probably up to 10 grand, including exam costs. So it's extremely expensive. The materials are can get very pricey for someone that wants to get started. A lot of books you have to read, a lot of video on demand that you might watch, and even some lab equipment. Maybe depending on the track you're going through, that lab equipment you might have to rent. You cannot buy because it'll probably set you back hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on the track. Luckily for the enterprise infrastructure track, a lot of it you can virtualize, so it's not as expensive. You might just have to do some rack rentals or purchase a server to virtualize a lot of the technologies. But not only that, you've got your rack rentals, or you have to have a way to interact with those devices to get hands-on practice. You have to go through a lot of books, I believe, that really explain things in depth to a way that would get you close to what Cisco defines as an expert in the field, and also a lot of video on demand products you'd have to go through. And all of those combined, they cost thousands of dollars. And not only that, the lab exam itself is $1,600 per attempt. And for most people, it takes, from what I've heard, 2 to 3 attempts to get the credential, the Cisco Certified Internet Network Expert.
So you are a teenager. You're a very ambitious and very smart teenager, but still a teenager, raising money for these training materials. You get connected with the CEO of the training company, and he says, we want to sponsor your journey. What does that mean at that point? What happened from there?
So what happened from there was Mr. McLean actually got me set up with a lot of the ability to use rack rentals, use some of the video on demand materials that you'll have to go through. And it helped me, I guess, expedite a lot of what I initially anticipated for waiting on. So I was able to just immediately jump in and go through some of Brian McGann's content and go through a lot of the labs from the workbooks and use the workbooks and use some of the rack rentals.
Can you talk about your training in depth? Where did you start? How challenging was it? And we'll start there. Where did you start, and was it very challenging right out of the gate?
From the IE journey, or just the whole networking journey in general?
Let's start with the whole networking journey in general.
So initially, I started back when the CCNA used to be at 2 parts. Now it's just at 1 part. They used to have the CCENT, the Cisco Certified Entry Networking Technician, and then the CCNA, the Cisco Certified Network Associate. So I started off with the first part of the CCNA, and I didn't have initially a lot of direction in terms of materials. So initially, I was reading some Cisco Press books that the material didn't stick with me in the beginning, and I was going through some YouTube videos that I kind of understood, but I had trouble understanding how everything fit together, as I'd not set up a network before, right? So it was a bit challenging until I actually discovered this book by Todd Lamley, the CCNA official Cert. Well, it's not the official Cert guide, but it's one of the Cert guides that you can get. And it really explained things down to a level that's understandable. It didn't feel dry. It felt like when I was reading the book that it felt like someone was right in front of me explaining networking. It didn't feel like I was reading some documentation or a white paper. And ever since I used that book in the beginning, it helped me really understand things a lot better. It uh, helped me progress a lot better through the CCENT and then the CCNA. And I also used a lot of some video on demand from some other vendors. But one of the main ones I enjoyed using was INE. I remember going through some of Keith Bogart's content on the CCENT and the CCNA, and it helped really emphasize and go into very heavy depth, but also be entertaining as well. So it didn't feel like I had to read a lot of these big Cisco Press CCNA books in the beginning. So that was kind of in the beginning. And to get the CCENT, it took me around 9 months. So up until then, I never really studied on my own. I mean, I was going to school, but I never did any form of really self-study. So it took me a while to kind of get my schedule going, my consistency going with studying, figuring out what worked best for me. And then once I got that over with, I got started on the CCNA, the ICND2. It was called at the time the exam ID. And it took me only about 3 months, about 3, 4 months to actually get that part done, since I already had a good foundation of networking. I had a good foundation for how I enjoyed studying, how I learned studying. So that part took me around 3 to 4 months. Uh, and from there, I still continued. I thought, well, you know what? The CCNP is the next logical step. I could have specialized back then with different CCNAs. I mean, there was like CCNA security, CCNA collaboration, CCNA service provider. But I thought for me, well, I'm already very, very invested into routing and switching. So why not just go for the next step above that, which was a CCNP. So the CCNP, when I did that at that part, or at that time, was the older CCNP. That was when it was three parts. So there was a route exam, there was a switch exam, and then there was a T-shoot exam. So I started off with the switch exam. I heard from everyone else that that was one of the easier exams to start off with. That one took me about the same as the ICND2 part of the CCNA. It took me about 3 to 4 months. I got that one the first time. Didn't have to retest. Barely passed, but I felt the exam was fair. It delved really deep into switching at a CCNP level. And then the next exam I took was the route exam, which was a beast to study for, because they went very, very in depth into routing protocols and even some other services. So they wanted you to understand NTP very well. VPNs were actually surprisingly covered a lot. I remember DMVPN was covered a lot. I remember some MPLS topics were covered a lot. So it kind of broadened your horizon and also went into depth into EIGRP, OSPF, and just a bit of BGP. And then for that one, it took me 2 attempts. So the first attempt, I think I failed by 22 to 24 points. So I was right on the mark, almost there, but didn't unfortunately get it the first time. So I went back. I think I took about a month or so to kind of go back and study for it again. And I went for it again, and then I passed it the second time barely. And then from then on, I went to take the last CCNP exam for routing and switching, which was the T-shoot exam. And that one took me about 2, 3 months to study for. I failed the first time. I didn't have a lot of troubleshooting skills that I have now. And not only that, I made a mistake by going very tired into the exam environment. So I felt that that kind of set me back. And similarly with that exam, I think if I recall correctly, I failed by 20 or so points. So I was very close, went back a second time and got it. And then finally, like I said in the beginning, I kind of wanted to go for the CCIE. I kind of had that as a big plan or big goal. I never thought that I would actually get there, but I decided to end up going for it, and that's when I set up kind of a GoFundMe to help out with some resources, and then that's where the CEO of INE, Mr. Richard McLean, reached out to me, and now we're here. So there was a lot of struggles along the way, and by no means I know a lot of people will say I'm very intelligent, but it took me about a month to learn subnetting, so that's what also set back my CCNA. That took me a total of about a year or so.
Wow. Every time I talk to you, Michael, I am just absolutely awestruck by your journey and by just the everything that you are going through and have been through, and just your dedication. Really, it's inspiring. I just saw a question come in from chat, and this seems like a great place to ask it. Kevin Powers, watching on LinkedIn, asked, how old were you when you got your first cert? And what is it? I know you just kind of mentioned that, but how old were you when you first started on this journey and actually got that first cert?
So when I first started around the journey, I was almost 13. I was kind of late 12 years old, almost 13. And my first cert that I got was a CCENT, the Cisco Certified Entry Networking Technician, and I got that at around 13 years old, almost 14.
What was it at that point when you were a 13-year-old, where a lot of 13-year-olds are like maybe not thinking about their careers or something like that? What do you think it was about you that made you so focused and so interested in this?
To be honest, I just really love learning about things. So, and I honestly I didn't think about in the beginning about being so committed. It just happened. I just kept learning and learning and learning more about networking, and I just kind of stuck with it to be honest. So it was something that I guess you could say almost coincidentally happened. But yeah, I don't know. It was one of those things where I just loved learning and I loved networking, and I just stuck at it. That was just something about it.
Well, you're passionate about it. I'm sure
Hmm.
that helps it not make, you know, not make it feel so much like work, right? Obviously, learning and you know, the networking zone that you're in is a huge passion of yours. When you were really involved in that training, you talked about really intense training and studying. How how many hours a day were you doing that when you were, say, at the height, like studying for an upcoming exam? Do we still have Michael?
Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go.
Awesome. No, okay. So when I did my CCNA, I kind of stuck with a plan of studying about 3 hours every day, 2 to 3 hours. There was, of course, some days where things came up, but I like to stay very consistent with about 3 hours. And once I got to the CCNP level and kind of CCIE, it kind of ranges anywhere from 2 hours to 6 hours, just depending on what workload I had, either with school or now with work. But I usually try to push myself to do 4 to 6 hours, depending on the day. But it honestly ranges anywhere from 2 to 6 hours almost daily.
How do you balance that with school? I know high school is very demanding these days. How do you balance that training and studying time with academic studies?
Sure. So surprisingly, for a lot of the high school work I went through, it wasn't too demanding. Of course, there were some times that where I had to finish a project later in the evening, or I got assigned this big project to do at school, so I had to focus several days on it. So I would try to study to get home probably around 4 or 5 o'clock, do some homework, do something right that I had to take care of, like homework or a project, and then I would study when I did, for example, the CCNA. I would do from 7 to 10 daily, 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock,
Wow.
and then I would, if I had to, I would continue working on homework or whatever it was. So there was definitely some days where uh, I of course couldn't study every day, but I tried to make an effort to study every day, and overall it averaged out around 3 hours per day. Sometimes I would study more on weekends to kind of offset that, to kind of make the average out 3 hours per day. So it just had to do with prioritizing things. So if it was some small piece of homework or something of that nature, I would do it as quick as I could. Sometimes like on the ride home, or other times I might have had to push my studies a bit or kind of shift it. But mostly, I would say I was generally able to stay within the 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. study every day. But of course, there were some days where that couldn't be done, and I made up for it on the weekend or the following week or so on and so forth.
I think you've nailed the life skill of multitasking for sure.
No kidding.
Your parents must be incredibly proud of you.
Oh, they enjoy what I'm doing. They're glad that I kind of set myself up for a professional career path, which I'm doing now, and they're honestly excited about and love what I'm doing.
I want to dig in a little bit to your specifically your CCIE journey. What has that? Well, I guess how long have you been studying for the CCIE?
So I would say probably officially you could say I've been studying since September of 2019. So it's been what, about 2 years or so, a little bit over. A lot of things have come up, but yeah, I've been at it for about 2 years now, give or take.
Okay, and I know you took that exam earlier this year. Can you talk a little about the studying specifically in the months leading up to that exam? Kind of how you were, how much time you were dedicating, how you were feeling, how you were balancing everything. I mean, that was right about the time you were graduating from high school as well.
Correct. So luckily, I would say that because of the current situations, I was doing school online. uh, leading up to my graduation. So even then, the classes became a whole lot shorter, and so did the homework. So I had a good amount of time, a lot more amount of time to study than if I were going to school in person, which I was the previous years, of course. So I would try and focus on all the core topics that I thought were going to be tested, such as OSPF, EIGRP, BGP, multicast, some of the VPN technologies, and I try to study some of the newer technologies as well. To be honest, I didn't anticipate some of the newer technologies being as big as they were, and that kind of bit me in the rear when I took my first attempt. But yeah, that's kind of uh, what my journey was, kind of leading up into the months going
So,
in.
I spoke with you a couple times leading up to that exam. How were you feeling during the summer? When did you take it? Was it August?
It was August 27th or
Okay.
29th.
Um,
Mhm.
how were you feeling during the summer? I mean, were you nervous? Were you anxious? Were you excited?
I was a little bit of everything, to be honest. I was excited. I felt that I had been studying for it for a while, and I wanted to mainly go in and see if how I did. Otherwise, I felt that I would get very, very burnt out. So I felt that I wanted to go test myself, see if I were up to the standards that Cisco set for the exam, for the practical exam. And I was excited but also nervous because I wasn't sure. I hadn't seen a lot of people talk about their testing experiences yet. So I was excited but also nervous because I wasn't sure how much of each topic they were possibly going to cover or how hard or how in depth. But I was excited to at least go in there and finally challenge it, at least the first time.
In terms of your studies, what areas did you really focus on? What did you think would be on the exam? And in hindsight, do you feel like you focused on the right things?
So when I went to study for the exam, I focused on a lot of what a lot of people described as would be on the previous exam. So a lot of the core routing and switching I focused a lot on. I focused a lot on EIGRP, OSPF, BGP, MPLS, and some of the other technologies. And while they were covered, they weren't the other newer technologies I believe were covered a lot more. Like I said, that I anticipated, but I feel like at least on those technologies, I did study well enough for those parts.
Okay. Did you feel ready for the exam?
Oh, so because I wasn't as familiar with some scripting technologies. I felt ready on the core routing and switching, but not on the newer technologies as much as I should have. I kind of went in thinking, well, I guess there's only one way to find out how ready I am, right? Just to go in there and sit the exam, and that's when I found out that I probably wasn't ready enough.
I remember talking to you on the phone. I think you were like driving to the exam or something, and I was just checking in with you. And I remember just being blown away by you. You seemed so calm and very, very just calm. Like I feel like I would have had butterflies and just been so anxious and nervous. And you were like, I'm good, feel good, ready to go. Did you feel like that while you were taking the exam? Was it nerve wracking for you?
I went in the exam feeling a bit nervous. Didn't eat much breakfast, but I did eat some enough to make sure that I held my breakfast in. But I felt a bit nervous, and I kind of sat down in the testing center. And I didn't feel as nervous, or I didn't really feel anxious. I did a bit, to be honest, but not like enough where it was taking over what I was thinking a lot. And then once I got to certain questions, I was like, well, now I feel nervous. Once I was in the exam, so that was so I kind of went in there a bit nervous, not really, just a bit, and then I got calm, and then I got to some sections and I was like, well. yeah, I'm a bit nervous now.
Yeah. How did you feel walking out of the room?
Definitely. Uh, I I felt like I got I definitely got tested well on everything I studied. I felt I could have done a lot better. In hindsight, knowing what I know now, going back, but I also felt that honestly I didn't get it the first time. So it kind of when I left the testing center, I already knew well enough how I did. That happened to be the truth that unfortunately I didn't get it the first time. But I did feel hopeful at least that I knew exactly what the exam environment's like and what to focus on next time. So I had a bit of confidence going and thinking about taking the next attempt.
Yeah, I'm sure that was I'm sure that was very disappointing. I mean, obviously a huge thing. But I remember something you posted short shortly after you got the news, within a couple days. And one thing that struck me was you said, I guess I didn't get it this time, but I won't give up. Um, how do you when you hit walls like that, or when you hit exam failures, or you just hit those moments where you're just like, I don't know if I can do this. How do you power through those moments?
Surprisingly, each time I failed IT, any form of IT exam, my first thought was, well, I wish I could just go back the next day and jump immediately at it. So it does feel to a certain extent like it does bring you down a bit, but at least for me, I felt like I was also excited for the next attempt. Surprisingly, so it's kind of a mix of both where. It does suck, but at least you know it's not like the end of the world. When you fail an exam like this, there's always a second attempt. So that kind of keeps me going forward. There's always multiple attempts you can always take. So it's not like your life is completely over. So I had that in mind. So it's not so I didn't take it too personal or if I didn't do well on an exam.
That's good. I'm glad you know that your life is not over if you don't pass an exam. um, so how did you give yourself a break after the exam before you jumped back into studying?
Oh, for sure. So I had definitely within that same day, I the first thing I did, and one of the things I learned from failing an exam that helps is uh, so before I took a break, I kind of wrote down everything down that I thought I would need to focus on next time. Some technologies that I needed to look over again, and then one of the things that I did was took a nap. I realized when I failed one of my CCNP exams that one of the best ways that I would remember something, like what I would focus on again, is to take a nap, maybe like a short nap or maybe an hour nap, wake up, and immediately I would remember more about the exam and write things down. So once I got that going, I did take a break. I went to meet some family that was up there in the Dallas area. I went to meet some coworkers and all from work, and I actually spent a pretty good time up there. I hadn't been to Dallas in a while, but it was actually fun and surprising. I wasn't so focused on the exam. I know some people coming out of the exam, even if they think they passed or failed, they're really anxious about it. But for me, I kind of did feel a bit down, but at the same time, I was surprisingly relaxed, I would say, uh, going after and taking a break those next few days. And I actually had a good amount of fun in Dallas. And once I came back, I gave it about a week or two before I kind of started looking over again some of the technologies I wanted to focus on and do some research on again. So I did definitely take a break immediately after the exam, and then once I got back home in South Texas.
Interesting tactic there to to take a nap. I mean, I guess everyone in their studying has to figure out what works for them, but great advice, to leave that exam and do your thing, but write down all the things that you think you might need to know for next time. That's great advice.
Exactly, and I actually discovered that by accident that I remember coming home from it was the route exam when I failed the first time. I felt very tired, and I wrote some things down, and I was like, well, you know what, I'm gonna go take a nap. And then I took a nap, and then I immediately remembered a lot more about the exam than I did just coming home from the exam. So
Yeah, I mean, you give your brain a rest after after a tough day of a lot of thinking. Probably,
yeah, exactly.
brain's probably thanking you. All right, a couple questions coming in, and this is a great. They're in this vein, so I want to get to these now. What is a piece of advice that you'd give to other younger students who are interested in pursuing technical training?
I would say definitely reach out to someone who you know is in technology. I believe uh, knowing or having guidance is important. So that's my biggest piece of advice. I've seen some people that they kind of started off in their tech career and they didn't advance much because they didn't have much guidance per se, or what to study, what to do to move up, what technologies to learn. So
Mm-hmm.
the main thing I would give advice to younger people is to reach out to someone and find a mentor so that they can give you guidance. Because obviously those people have been in a similar position as you, and they've had a lot of lessons learned, and you can feed off of those lessons learned, so you have proper guidance. So I mean, if you would want to reach out to me, that's fine, or really anyone else. But I would say the main thing is find someone who's in the field already and who has some of the results you like within the field, and ask them to kind of mentor you and give you kind of a path. Because otherwise, you can have resources and materials that you're using, but it's not very practical unless you have guidance as to what kind of career path you want to go to, and maybe knowing someone within that career path can kind of show you, here's what I'm working on, here's what it's actually like. Maybe one thing is actually watching like a YouTube video about, day in the life of like a network engineer, and another thing is seeing or shadowing or mentoring or getting mentored by someone else showing you, here's what I actually do. Here are the different actual types of network engineers. Here are some of the specializations. So I would say the number one piece of advice is to reach out to someone that is in the field that has the results you'd like to have.
We interview a lot of different people on this stream in a lot of different fields, and one very common thing, Michael, that we hear from just about everyone is the importance of community and of making a connection and finding a mentor and reaching out, whether it's through social media, LinkedIn, whatever. Was that difficult for you in the beginning, or was that something that came very naturally to you?
So initially, my father was working in the service provider space, the internet service provider space. So he more on the sales side, but he knew a lot of technical people within the company he was at before, that I could kind of reach out to, that were studying for like their CCNA, or had a few years of IT experience, or probably a few decades. And he kind of I kind of wanted to see if I could do the same to be in the field. It introduced me to some of those people, uh, and it came kind of easy on that end. But what I also did was I set up a LinkedIn. I reached out to different people, sending a message saying, "Hey, I'd like to find out what you're doing." Or do you think you can mentor me? Or some people even reached out to offer to be my mentor. So LinkedIn is definitely very important, or very useful on that aspect of finding people that are in the field and that can mentor you. Definitely asking around. You never know. Maybe you might have a family member that you didn't know that they were doing IT, or maybe a friend, or even there's, I guess even more so now, since the the climate has changed. There's a lot more like people meeting up in person now, like there was before. So there's definitely a lot of meetup groups that you can find, depending on where you are at. There are maybe like Cisco users groups or different user groups for different technologies, and those are places that you want to go to and find people. There's definitely a lot of knowledgeable people in those areas that you can talk to, ask them if you can have a cup of coffee with, or buy them lunch, and definitely pick their brains. So there's a lot of potential for you to find people that will mentor you either online or in person or even within your own circle. You never know.
Yeah, just making those connections and putting yourself out there, I think, is a huge, huge deal. Again, whether it's in networking or any other field, and for that matter, whatever field you're in, outside of technology, in technology, whatever. I wanted to ask, jumping back to your CCIE studying, how did your studying change from before you took the exam to now? How is it different now?
So definitely when I started the IE journey, I wasn't as as uh, as uh, as I guess as knowledgeable or as in depth of knowledgeable of certain technologies. So there was a lot of learning and having to relearn some topics since even I was barely getting some professional experience and I hadn't been touching certain technologies. So I was having to relearn a lot, and especially in the IE journey with any track, they cover so much that you're either having to constantly relearn different topics, and then once at post exam failure, I'd gotten very comfortable with certain technologies, but now I'm focusing more on my weaker points. Back then, I would say almost everything from the CCIE perspective was a weak point because I wasn't didn't have as much knowledge as I should have. But now I'm just focusing on the specific weak spots as much as rather than the everything that I was focusing on before.
What advice would you give to someone, and you can be as specific as you'd like about this, but what kind of advice would you give to someone who is just beginning their CCIE journey, besides taking
I
naps?
would say it can get oh I would say it can get very overwhelming because initially maybe in your CCNA or CCNP days it a lot of technologies as long as you work with them enough you probably won't forget, but a lot of things will come up in life, and not only that but just in general you might not be as focused on one technology, and it's super easy to get overwhelmed because you're having to relearn and relearn if you're not practicing that technology a lot. So I would say go in with the assumption that things might come up, different life circumstances, but definitely stay focused, and that it's okay to relearn a lot of topics because you're just going to be covering so much that it's not uncommon that maybe you knew some specifics about OSPF and now you don't anymore. So it's fine to go back and relearn them. And the best way to kind of keep those technologies stuck in your head is just to, as I always like to say, lab every day. Take those technologies and work with them as much as you can. Maybe you can't work with them in a production environment because maybe your job doesn't use that technology, but you can more than definitely spin a technology up in the lab, configure OSPF, maybe MPLS. Maybe you don't deal with MPLS a lot, but you can at least work with MPLS in a lab. So you make sure that you don't forget a lot of those concepts, for example.
So do you already have your next exam scheduled?
I somewhat do. I have it tentatively scheduled kind of for January, but I'm thinking moving it more towards the March timeframe, so I have a bit more time to kind of hone in. Because a lot of things with work have been going on and a lot of other things. So I figured giving myself a bit more extra time to kind of go in and make sure that I'm ready for the second attempt and hopefully the last attempt on this track.
Well, hopefully so. We are pulling for you. Absolutely. You know that you have some very good friends here at INE. You mentioned your job, and I want to talk a little about that. So tell us where you're working, what you're doing, and when you got that job. I guess you graduated in June, right? May or June?
Yes, that is correct. So I graduated in May. So I'd actually posted something uh, around mid 2019 about wanting to get more professional experience, put some of the technologies I've been learning with uh, on the IE to actual production use. And I'd actually gotten reached out by a company down here, and they're kind of all over Texas and got a lot of different offices throughout Cisco. Partner at a VAR as well, by the name of NetSync. And one of the people that I somewhat knew reached out to me and said, "Hey, we'd love to see if we can give you an internship and kind of fostering and use some of the stuff you're learning and put it to actual production use so you can actually see how it's implemented and trouble and learn how to troubleshoot better." And this was around late 2020 or so. Yep. So around October, I kind of got reached out by, and by late November, I actually had an internship going with this company as a networking intern, which basically meant I was working on a lot of network engineering projects, uh, being led by a lot of other network engineers. So I was able to ask questions, learn a lot, and then it eventually turned into once I kind of graduated high school in May, around June or kind of June July timeframe, I actually got offered a full-time position as a data center associate consultant, so network engineer in the data center space, because data center is what I wanted always to focus on a lot more. Use kind of a lot of the same routing and switching technologies, but apply them at a larger scale at the data center level. So it was pretty cool that they actually reached out to me and gave me the opportunity to use some of the stuff I learned and apply it in real life.
Yeah, so you did not choose to go the college route, or at least you haven't yet. Do you think that you ever will, or is that something that's maybe not in the cards for you? Like, what kind of discussion do you have around that?
So I somewhat am a bit right now through kind of WGU. I kind of saw
Okay.
some of their programs and I found it interesting uh, because with that the program you're able to certifications that you do, you're able to transfer them and use them as credits for classes, since a lot of classes, or not a lot, but some classes, in order to pass the class you need to pass the certification like the A plus or the network plus. And I found that program a bit interesting, and I'm not opposed to getting a college degree, so I've kind of been wanting to also go down that route as well. So I not only have the certifications, experience, but also a college degree that I can have in my belt as well.
Yeah, it seems like that's one of the debates in the field, because there are so many educational opportunities outside of traditional school, with training, with studying, and certifications, that sort of thing. But a lot of people, just like you, still want that college experience. So it's really interesting to know that WGU makes that, I guess, gives you credit for those certifications. How did you hear about that?
So one of my close friends that actually kind of mentored me in a way ever since the beginning of my journey. He was going through a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity from WGU,
Hmm.
and that's actually where he kind of got started a bit with his whole kind of networking journey. He's an awesome guy. His name is Josh, and he was going through that program, and I like the program that you're able to do a lot of things on your own time. They give you a lot of the material, and you're able to study on your own. A lot of it is self-study. There's no actual class lectures that you have to attend uh, mandatorily. So and I like the he excuse me, he was talking about the program enough and really loved it that I kind of wanted to do the same type of program because he was able to work full time and kind of fit it in his schedule. So that's where the initial point I've heard, and I met some other people that have gone through their degree programs and said they loved the degree program as well.
All right, so you went from going to school, working and studying, to graduating high school, studying, working full time, and also going to school. You have not slowed down a bit.
Not at all.
This question came in from Crystal, and I'm curious myself. Where do you see yourself in the future? You're at the very beginning of what you could accomplish. What do you aspire to do?
Hopefully, I see myself more of a in the managerial level of things. I definitely love to still stay very technical, but I would also love to focus more on the people side of things, hopefully maybe as like a network architect or kind of like a network architect kind of type manager. Probably within, 5 to 10 years, I'd love to see myself be there in that form of position where I'm also able to be technical, but I'm also very hands-on technical person, but very hands-on people person as well.
Do you have a place in mind, like a specific job at a specific place that's like, this is the dream job?
Really anywhere where I'm able to apply my skills at a huge level. I mean, I wouldn't mind working for a place like AWS or Google. Those places would be awesome, but really, or even in the government space as well. Anywhere where networks are at a very large scale, I would love to see myself working at.
Um, Dustin Warren, who is watching on LinkedIn, asked a question. Dustin, thanks for the question. It's a great question. Asking, do you have any interests outside of networking?
I
Not,
do.
go ahead.
Mhm. No, sorry. So I somewhat do in kind of music. I'll be honest, I'm not expert at music by any chance, but I do have a guitar that I'll pick up every once in a while, but then I'll leave it there and then I'll kind of pick it up again. So I kind of enjoy music. I'm not very well versed in it, per se, but every once in a while I'll pick up my guitar and play just a bit uh, or uh, or try to relearn some of the theory because I hadn't touched my guitar in a while. So I would say music is probably a kind of interest that I haven't been able to focus so much on, but it's there that I jump to every once in a while.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask what maybe what are some of your other hobbies as well? So you music, anything else? What's your favorite TV show?
Favorite TV show? That's a good one. I would say probably the IT Crowd. It can be, there's a lot of IT jokes, but it's also a very comedic show, just in general.
All right, the IT crowd. I've not seen that one. I will have to check that one out. Do you think that you will absolutely stay in the networking path? Do you see yourself ever branching out to a different type of field?
I kind of do. I love networking since everything uses a network to communicate on. But I wouldn't say that I don't see myself seeing going into maybe cybersecurity or probably more of a DevOps focused role, where I'm able to implement a lot of the things I'm doing, but in code or being able to automate some of those functions. So probably either more of a DevOps focused role in the future or cybersecurity. Pen testing kind of looks fun to me. I haven't done it much. I'd seen some guides, some labs on penetration testing. So I wouldn't. I'd actually be pretty open to kind of broadening out and maybe going into, let's say, cybersecurity or a lot more than I am in networking, or probably more of a DevOps focused role, or maybe even a service provider type role.
A lot of opportunities. There are a lot of, you have such a great technical mind. I have no doubt that whatever field you go into, you will uh, be an absolute star in it. Rianne asked, watching on YouTube, I believe, once you pass your CCIE, what will your next goal be?
Probably to kind of go in and finish up a degree. I would love to see myself go for another CCIE, uh, probably like in data center, more focused, but probably finishing up a degree, maybe finishing up a bachelor's degree within a certain amount of time, or maybe even getting a master's degree might be my next biggest goal. So I'll actually see when I get there. It's one of those things where maybe I want to focus more on the degree side and get that over with a lot quicker, or maybe want to focus on another CCIE and data center, or maybe something else from another vendor. Maybe focus on Juniper a lot more. Those are kind of my what I'm thinking right now. It might change from one day to the next, but those are what I'm throwing up in the air at the moment.
Well, you've certainly earned the freedom to explore a little bit. You have the world on a string, absolutely, Michael. Is there anything that any other advice maybe that you haven't already shared that you'd like to share with our audience about your journey, about what you've done, going at this at such a young age? Anything you've learned that you think would be helpful to others who are maybe thinking of following your footsteps?
I think probably that one of the I know it's kind of cliche and more general, but I would say goal setting. It's probably some of the one of the things I need to, in some cases, work on a lot better. Maybe like when scheduling exams, but I believe during my whole journey, one of the things that has helped me a lot has been setting goals as to when I'm going to learn this certain technology, when I'm going to go and take an exam, and keeping myself accountable for those goals is definitely important. It's and staying consistent as well. Staying consistent is a lot better than taking sprints at something, uh, because it's not learning technologies is not a race. And also, I would say focus a lot on the fundamentals. It's a lot easy to kind of want to jump in and work with routing protocols or work with some other technology than it is to maybe understand like how TCP actually works, or understanding some of the smaller things that kind of give you a good foundation. So as I like to tell some people, don't skip leg day, as they say, because it'll definitely help you if you understand the fundamentals really well when troubleshooting or when learning a new technology. Because otherwise, you'll have to relearn some of the fundamentals, or you'll just kind of be stuck at a point where you're gonna have to go back a lot.
Nice analogy. Don't skip leg day. Just power through, right? All right, Michael, thank you so much. It is always an absolute delight to talk to you. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Well, as always, thank you very much for having me on. I'm super glad to be part of this event, and appreciate everyone that joined, that stick through this conversation between you and I. So I'm very thankful for everyone for their time today.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you being here. We'll check back in with you soon. And that wraps it up on today's stream. Thanks for watching. If you missed it live, be sure to look for the replay across our social channels and on the INE website. You can look for us again live next Tuesday, November 30th, for an AMA with our networking stars. We'll be here with networking legends Brian McGann, Rohit Pardasani, and Keith Bogart. And as always, you can submit your questions, so go ahead and get them ready. Be sure to like and subscribe on the social platform you're using right now so you can stay in the loop for details on next week and notifications when we go live. We'll see you next time. Until then, have a great week and a very happy Thanksgiving.